So now we are going to look at the shape of these two, okay, which decidedly we know earlier from earlier, utility maximization problem. We know them to be quasi-concave and quasi-convex, but how to check the same with using the algebraic definition? Now, one approach will be the first one, where we said that the convex combinations functional value will be higher or lower than u or v. So that approach is there. But we are more interested in the alternative algebraic definition that you said, the set of s higher than or s lower than. Why? Let's take the first problem. So we said that we are going to make a collection of a set which collects the domain. So here it will not be x, it will be collection of xy, such that f of xy equal to, greater than, so it will be greater than equal to k, and the other alternative is considering the other option, so less than or equal to k. And we are going to check which one of these two comes out to be a convex set. Okay, so for example, if this becomes a convex set, then we say that it is quasi-concave, and if this becomes a convex set, then we say that it becomes a quasi-convex. Now k is a constant, right? K is a constant. So essentially what we are looking at, or what we are trying to search, is the shape of xy equal to k, a fixed value, and the region above or below it. Right? So that's what we are trying to search. Now let's look at this. What is the shape of xy equal to k? This is very known to us. Why? Because if I write u instead of z equal to xy, and if I fix some value u equal to u bar, then this part, it becomes our old IC, which we know is rectangular hyperbola. Okay, so that means we know that it will look like this in x and y, correct? And for all of them, the collection of xy which equals to this line or above it, so above it means these points, since they are entirely contained in this boundary of a circle looking thing, okay? So this looks like the boundary of some circle which is going in this direction. But anyway, so this is a rectangular hyperbola, and we know that the upper contour, that's what we say, right? The upper contour is to be convex. So that means this is our S upper and this is convex, and that just gave us a quasi-concave, so Q-cave, so quasi-concave function. Okay. Now, just to add something extra, if I put xy equal to k equal to 0, then that will give me L-shaped IC. Okay. So here we have another look at the L-shaped IC. This is basically which looks like, which the functional structure is, xy equal to k, but the value is 0. So that is in z-axis, this z equals 0. For here, this z is non-zero, so you have rectangular hyperbola. So now we are going to look at the 3D picture of z equal to xy, okay, and we'll try to kind of imagine or gauge the contour. That is, if we take this 3D function, if we try to imagine how it creates an image on the xy plane, we'll understand how this result comes in. But for the time being, the solution is pretty simple, right? Through this alternative algebraic definition, we actually, in other terms, talked about the IC that we draw all the time in consumer behavior. Okay, so here we have drawn one such. All right, so now I'm going to share screen. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so this one, the image that you now see, okay, this is, let's try to enlarge it. Yes, so this is the z equal to xy. And what is the z equal to xy here? You see this green line, green axis and red axis, that has created the plane, the xy plane, which is slightly gray in color. Okay, you see that? And this blue straight line, this is our z-axis. Now, what is the z equal to xy? The z equal to xy is this red portion. Okay, so try to imagine that. It's a little bit hard to conceive. So you see, this is the red portion that you see, this 3D structure. That's our z equal to xy. That is the 3D quasi-concave function. So you have this darker red here. That's one of the other side of this function. Okay, so it's like kind of 4 windows or 4 kind of windows which are curvy inward. So the curvature appears inside. Okay, so here is also a curvature. So the function comes like this, then curve, and as it comes, it approaches 0. Okay, and then again enlarges, and then it has 4 sides. One of the side you can see in the in one portion. Yeah, okay. So one of the side that you see is here. This is one side. It has something inside also. Okay, so this is the red area is our z equal to xy. Now try to imagine how so now if I try to take a contour on the xy plane, then you will see the rectangular hyperbola appearing. Okay, all right. So basically, this inward looking part, okay, from here the function turns inside, and then it goes inside, and then it again comes out and into this red portion. Here also you can see this is light red, and there is this section which is deep red, because there is one window which is on the back side of this. Okay, and the surface closer to z axis, this goes like this. It goes like this. Okay, and it then turns outside again. So now if I take a slice along xy plane, if I take a slice, if I cut it along xy axis, then you can easily visualize the convex IC that is being generated. Okay, so that's what we worked with. And in 0, it will be obviously L-shaped, because you can see that here at this point, okay, at this point it is very sharp. It's becoming sharp at 0. The continuity that you see here is there, but the smoothness is gone. At 0, it's quite sharp. Okay, so that's what makes L-shaped when z becomes 0. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing the screen again. All right, so this is how z equal to xy looks like. And using our definition, basically used a concept which is very known to us. We looked into the shape of the ICs. Now we will go to the second one, and we'll be doing the same job. Okay, so what is the second one? The second one is x minus a whole square plus y minus b whole square. So we said that in terms of xy, if I take x and y to be the only variable. Now let's look at this. What you're looking at is that we are trying to find the shape of x minus y whole square, y minus b whole square equal to some k. And also we'll talk about the values below or above it. Okay, so now let's look at that. All right, so Okay, so what is this? This is just a circle. Its center is at a comma b and its radius is root k. So again, we are using the idea of IC, and we know how a circle looks like in the first quadrant, right? It looks like this. So that means if I take a convex combination of these 2 points, let's say our M and N, then it will go below. It will go below. So the values that will be taken in the convex combination will appear on this side. So that means the f of xy that we are trying to look at, okay, fixing some k, okay, so that will be under it. Okay, so the convex set appears below it. So that says we are looking at a quasi-convex function. So this is how we use the algebraic definition. Basically, you draw the IC and you look at the look at how it comes. So if for the lower set it becomes a convex set, okay, then okay, so that's how this is. This the first one becomes quasi-concave and the second one becomes quasi-convex. All right, so now again I'm going to share screen and let's look at the 3D picture of this equation. Okay, so wait. Okay, so now we are going to share screen. So you can see the z equal to, but for this one it is not a and b. As you can see, the center lies at 0. So this is basically z equal to x square and y square. And now looking at the 3D structure, you can easily imagine how the IC will be, and this is quasi-convex. Okay, so this is in 3D the function. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing. This is a very easy picture. Okay, so that's how our understanding through geometry and through our ICs works. Okay, so that's how we can use our previous knowledge of drawing to be able to draw an IC, and we can see, we can decide on quasi-convex and quasi-concave. Okay, so now we will go to a more familiar one, that is the differentiability condition, and we'll look at how that works out. Okay, so differentiability, let's say definition. Okay, so here obviously, trivially we have to imagine that the function is differentiable. Now, we can define the convexity and concavity assuming the first derivative exists, or we can define also assuming that the second derivative exists. Okay, now I'm going to write both the definitions, but the point is pretty simple, and the point is that in our work we generally work with a function for which second derivative exists. So our main concentration point will be the condition here and not this one. But anyways. Okay. So first comes first derivative. A differentiable function f x1 comma x2 comma dot 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 xn. I'm defining it directly for multivariable as it can easily be transferred to a definition comprising of the domain where comprises of lesser number of variables. So a differentiable function f of x1, x2, xn is quasi concave and quasi convex as we write it, if and only if for any two distinct points, u equal to obviously u1 to un and v equals to v1 to vn in the domain fv greater than equal to fu implies, since we have n, we have to write it like this, so j equal to 1 to n fju, which is basically the jth partial derivative into vj minus uj. So at the xj point, okay, and then here obviously it will change to fjv and the rest of it remains same. So fj minus uj, and in both the cases greater than equal to 0, where fj equal to, as I said, the jth partial derivative, so del f del xj evaluated at u or v as required. Okay. So what I'm saying is this: v and u are 2 points. So f of v greater than equal to f of u implies, so let's come at these, one of these, let's say at the lower one. So now u has n values in the point, correct? And v also has n values in the point. So there are n numbers here. So I'm talking about the jth one. So here somewhere around there will be vj and there also will be uj. So I'm taking the difference. Okay. And then this is fj v. That means you differentiate f by the xj and then you just put in that differentiated value, you put in the value of v and you just sum them up. Right? So you are doing it for every point. Okay, so that's what basically this means. So we can mechanically kind of do that. But some of the one of the important point that is to consider here, that it is dependent on the first order partials. Okay, so now to comprehend it in a more better way, let's look at what if we consider u and v to be univariate. So what happens u and v in univariate? Then how this condition looks like? Okay, so in univariate case, the condition it will become pretty simple, and then actually you cannot basically fathom that in the inside of it there is a role of partial derivatives. okay, which talks about the, which is also known as the directional derivatives. And then that name basically gives us more insight of why quasi-concavity or quasi-convexity must have this partial derivatives. Anyways, so in terms of univariate functions, I'm just going to rewrite here, erasing, okay? So in terms of univariate function, or let's write it here. So in terms of univariate function, what I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is that f prime u into v minus u and f dash v into v minus u, this must be greater than or equal to 0. That's what I'm saying. So in case of multivariate, we just sum them up along the first order partials evaluated at u or v. Okay, so that's not really, I mean, this condition is not really very handy to use. Okay, so that's why whenever our main concentration, that's why, is on the case where the second derivative exists. Also, as I said in the at the initials, at the very outset, that it will relate to border Hessian.